If you've ever played either of Paradox's grand strategy titles, Europa Universalis 4 or Crusader Kings 2, their latest release, Imperator Rome, will be familiar to you. What has been promoted since its announcement as a blend between the Empire management and character-centric interaction of the aforementioned games, this Roman Republic-era grand strategy title brings out some of the best aspects of both, even if it has to sacrifice some depth in parts to do so. Imperator Rome puts you in a fairly tumultuous period of antiquity. Set in 450 AUC or 304 BCE, Mesopotamia is in the middle of the wars of the Diadochi, Rome is still a rather small regional faction just flexing its influence, and Carthage is the supreme naval power in the Mediterranean. Playing as any one of over 400 nations, it is your job to ensure the nation as a whole survives, be it through diplomacy, economy, or war. Paradox Grand Strategy games make a point to provide you with at-a-glance information about your empire. After all, there is so much going on at once, it'd be a pain to constantly have to scroll through menus to get basic information. The top bar UI provides you with this information, you just have to decipher it. Some things like your treasury and manpower are obvious, even if you've never really played Paradox games. Hovering over them gives you a solid idea on how they work and how they accrue. Your power resources are more vague, but their goal is to provide you with benefits across all sectors of gameplay, be it army buffs, inventions, religious omens, or influencing politics within and outside of your nation. What are bound to be the most abstract resources aren't even really resources or indications on the health or threat of your empire. Your stability is the most direct reflection of your empire's health. Keeping stability in the positive will benefit you with increased tax income, legitimacy research points, and loyalty of subject states. Negative stability does the exact opposite, and if not managed quickly, it can rip your nation apart. Aggressive expansion is an indication of how other nations view you as a threat. Conquering other territory will always increase your aggressive expansion, even with the casus belli. Get that score too high though, and you're bound to find your neighbors alliancing up and then taking you on. Aggressive expansion does reduce over time, albeit slowly. And lastly, we have tyranny, where aggressive expansion gauges the threat you face to other nations. Tyranny gauges the threat the people in your own nation feel about your ruler. Any action dealing in force against other characters can be seen as an act of tyranny. Having too high of a tyranny rating, and your population becomes unhappy, characters become disloyal, leading to potential devastating civil wars. Balancing and understanding all of these may seem difficult and confusing, but Imperator does a pretty good job helping you out with it. Every event or decision you can make against a character, faction, or otherwise lays out the cost in terms of resources and their effects. So if you're new to the grand strategy realm, just take it slow and easy, it'll make sense pretty quick. Your population and Imperator, known simply as Pops, are the fuel of your empire. They are your source of taxes, manpower, research generation, production, and commerce. Without them, your empire does not grow. Each social class of Pop provides certain benefits to your empire. They also have their own culture and religion and satisfaction, and it's these three factors that really determine their effectiveness. Your empire has a dominant culture and religion, and Pops that do not share these will generate unrest, and unrest can be devastating in Imperator. One of the most effective ways to level that unrest is through conversion and promotion. Converting helps promote unity and happiness. Promoting them also brings about satisfaction. Managing Pops was slow in the early game. As your empire grows and your power resources build up, I frequently went through some spending sprees to tackle the most troublesome areas. The pop mechanic fits extremely well in Imperator, to the point where I don't really know why Paradox hasn't used it in games like EU4, where that same format could have worked very well. Drawing from Crusader Kings 2, each nation will have their own set of characters to interact with. These characters have wealth, traits, jobs, life goals, families, and friends. In certain governments, either clans or factions that they belong to. You'll need to consider all of this when interacting with them. In terms of interaction, there's a fair bit of control that you can exert over your characters, though it's all political in nature. You can marry them off to one another, assign them to government jobs, or make them generals in your armies. You can make friendships to further your own leaders' agendas, or to prevent certain characters from rebelling. If a rival gets too popular, you can smear his reputation, or even take it a step further and imprison or execute him. These characters are most certainly going to be critical in how well your empire functions. However, it is very important to make it clear that this is not a character-centered role-playing experience. You are not trying to get a specific family through the 500 years of this game. Your government may change, your leaders will consistently change, but you are the nation. The stability of the nation is what's most important, not your characters. And since this isn't character-focused, The interaction level is pretty well balanced for Imperator. It leads to prioritization and shepherding the relationships that matter, whether that be a friend or a foe. As mentioned earlier, it's all from a political standpoint with national interests in mind, at least in theory. You will rarely want to engage with another character solely out of personal interest. It'll be for political gain or disdain for the good of the nation. Armies within Imperator have much more depth in them than, say, EU4. They're no longer just troops with certain stats that you can upgrade or buff with certain unlocked ideas. The biggest differences lie in army generation, army stances, and general loyalty. In order to generate certain unit types, you have to either have a specific resource already within your nation or import it via a trade route. This gives the player potential goals in expansion or diplomatic relations, something that EU4 really has a lack of. Army stances are one of the best new aspects in Imperator. Based on your army composition, you can choose an army stance that best complements that army, giving buffs or debuffs to your troops depending on what units you are up against. General loyalty has huge implications with it. As your generals succeed in your campaign, there's a chance that the units in that army will become loyal to your general. This may not seem like a bad thing, but an army that is too loyal will rebel, thinking their general should take the right place over your own dead body. These three factors make armies much more strategic and central to the game. They're still pawns in your national expansion goals, but they are significantly more important than in previous titles, and you'll need to think about managing them just as much as your other characters. There are three types of government in Imperator. Republics play out as elected officials that serve a specific term length. They provide some of the largest political sways in the game, as you can more easily try and control who gets to lead your nation once the ruler is gone. Monarchies have a line of succession that will always pass down to the next oldest child, where you'll then have to manage other characters who believe that they themselves could rule more effectively, dragging governors and generals into the mix on whose side to stick with. Tribal governments have the most appeal to me personally. They act as a monarchy in that the leader leads for life, but they also act as a republic due to the fact that on the death of the current leader they elect a new leader. Tribal governments have to manage clan leaders, who all lead their own military retinues, potentially causing issues should they become disloyal. Each government also has a series of offices that you can fill, giving bonuses to things like aggressive expansion reduction, increased pop happiness, or boost in income. Each office has a corresponding power associated with it, and it's simply a matter of choosing any character to fill an office, with the desire to fill it with someone that has a high martial, finesse, charisma, or zeal power standing. This is an area of the game that comes off pretty shallow. While you can influence characters, as we've already talked about, there isn't much depth behind each government type. Republics might be the most difficult, as you'll need to persuade enough senators to pull off any type of war, but that's about all you'll have to worry about. Influencing who will be your next leader is the only real challenge. For government offices, I just select the best characters, of which I can switch at any point in time, however many times I feel like doing it. The only negative effect seen from these actions is a suffering loyalty issue with the character I just kicked out. So to say that handling the government tab in Imperator doesn't provide much fun or excitement in the game might be a little bit of an understatement. I put governors in their own small section away from government because they are decently more involved and to me have a greater effect on your populace. Each province gets its own governor and has a choice of edicts to go with them. The effectiveness of some of these edicts does have a good chunk to do with your governor, the characteristics those characters have. For example, while finesse is the largest contributor, if you're wanting to convert pops to your religion, the higher the governor's zeal rating is, the more effective the province will be at converting pops. Governors and their edicts were something I initially just placed and forgot about, but as I dug deeper into the traits, edicts, and other details, I realized that mismanaging governors and edicts can have a drastic effect on pop satisfaction, unrest, provincial income, and even manpower. A smart Imperator player will want to keep tabs on their provinces just as much as anything else to get ahead. The economy and trade mechanics are one aspect of Imperator that makes this game shine. Your economy on the forefront is relatively simple. Taxes plus commerce equals your income, and army, navy, and fort maintenance equals your expenses. Yet on a molecular level, your economy is ever changing and has so many elements to consider. Commerce and tax are on a large part dependent on the satisfaction of your pops. Even the slightest unrest can affect how efficient your tax levels are, or even how effective the commerce-focused buildings operate inside your cities. Figuring in technology upgrades, nationwide events, leader traits, government traits, provincial edicts, and government official traits, you can see just how complex this economic system can be. It's far more in-depth than any Paradox game's ever seen to me, even with the lack of building variety. Trade does have an impact on your economy without a doubt. The more resources you have in your borders, the more trade routes you can establish going out, which can generate a good chunk of income. Not only that, but trade has significant influence for your own empire, since every resource provides some positive benefit to it. Iron is needed for heavy infantry, fish makes people happy, and having more than one of a certain resource can provide additional benefits. Those resource needs will also change as your nation expands, meaning that trade can be a near constant changing component to your economy. The more that I play, the more I'm looking into what's going in and out of my empire. Do I need the benefits of fish in this province, or could I better utilize bringing in iron to build up an army and fight the bordering nation? Exporting my extra grain might give me some income, but the boost of population and manpower growth might be a better use and expansion. Both systems play very well into each other. It creates a lot of flexibility in how you want to accomplish your goals, which means that, from an economic standpoint, Imperator works effectively for several different playstyles. You can focus on pure economic growth with trade and simply conquer what resources you need, or you can try to accomplish a taller empire, keeping things compact by importing what you need for your nation. My final subject on Imperator is on diplomacy. Diplomacy will play a remarkable role in Imperator, as the depth of diplomacy is what makes Paradox's grand strategy title so grand. If you played any of these grand strategy titles, diplomacy is almost a carbon copy of those games. Defensive leagues, alliances, guarantees, they're all in there. You can still insult countries, give them gifts, and even support rebels. There are some notable differences in how you accomplish diplomacy though, and it all revolves around your empire rank. Whereas, at least in EU4, you could form an alliance or a league with about anyone, in Imperator, you can only perform certain diplomatic actions in certain power ranking conditions. As Carthage, I can't even ally with the Turdetani because I'm a higher power rank. As Rome in the beginning, I couldn't enforce a peace or make certain demands because those diplo abilities are only for bigger factions. This restriction, if you could call it that, is what makes the diplomacy side of Imperator really interesting, and why, in my opinion, painting the map as quickly as possible could burn you. In my Turdetani campaign, I'm the largest faction in Iberia. As such, there's no one to ally with, but all the smaller factions have allied up, meaning a war with any of my neighbors is likely to bring in around 4 other factions, too much for me to handle at the moment. It creates some fantastic dynamics, shapes up some playstyles in ways I've never thought about in previous grand strategy games. Imperator Rome is a vast game. There are a lot of mechanics to think about at all times, but once you get them down, the game really opens itself up to replayability and creates a decent depth to its vanilla state. But it does feel like a vanilla game. Where there's depth, there's also shallowness, aspects of the game that I can tell are not fleshed out. There could definitely be more to government office side of things. 4 buildings seem awfully few to fill your provinces with, and navies are very plain without anything to them. And as any Paradox player knows, there's a reason why these feel so shallow. Imperator Rome could very well be looking at dozens of DLC for its future. DLC that will take very specific aspects of the vanilla game and crank out mechanics for them to make that aspect better. So any part of Imperator that I see shallowness in, I have a pretty good idea that I'll get expanded on at some point in the future. And yet, strangely, I'm okay with it. There's enough content in the vanilla game to keep me satisfied for a good while, and knowing that we will get consistent support and balances on a regular basis helps alleviate the shallow parts that I see. Overall, Imperator is a fantastic game that brings together 2 of Paradox's best-selling games and balances them out in a time period befitting of both the character management and empire building, as I arrived to the grand strategy scene much too late for CK2 and EU4. And I am very excited to see what features they can bring about in future DLC, and I look to be playing this game for many years to come. That's all for my review on Imperator Rome. There is a lot of content that I didn't cover in this review. My plan is to create guides and overviews periodically with specific topics per video that will get the in-depth look into the game, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with it. If you haven't already bought the game, I'd encourage you to take advantage of a discount and head over to Games Planet via the links in the description and the comment section. It'll help to support the channel as well, so I can continue to do these types of videos. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.